There is nothing new about racism, hate, violence, or anti-religious bigotry here in these United States of America. You know, from political hysteria against Catholics to Jews to Muslims, this is all something we've lived with. And I want to be very clear as we get into this next story. This kind of hate has been a mainstream part of American life for some time. It's been welcomed by elements across the spectrum and at times led from the top of our federal government, be it Woodrow Wilson, who was a Democrat, to Richard Nixon, who was a Republican. But there has been periods of progress, including a kind of public renegotiation in the civil rights era about what is acceptable, what the baseline is. To take one substantive issue that we've covered a lot in this program in the area of voting rights, after a lot of racist crackdowns against black people's right to vote in America, there was a period where the Voting Rights Act, which was Martin Luther King's contribution to our law, was authorized and reauthorized on a bipartisan basis, signed into its reauthorization by none other than George W. Bush as the last Republican president to do so. There was a time of breakthrough, and you know where I'm going with this. Whatever nominal breakthroughs there were, well, they've been set backwards. It's well documented that Donald Trump's 2016 campaign and then presidency renewed and mainlined both hate as an ideology and hate-related violence as crime, as domestic terrorism in our public life. This was someone who literally ran for office on a Muslim ban. And if you're familiar with religious bigotry, if you run for office saying we're not going to let Muslims in, that is not ethically, morally, or legally different than saying we're not going to let Jews in, or Catholics in, or whatever religion you want to scapegoat during that period of time in history. And if we've learned anything from history, it's wrong, also very counterproductive to having a society that works well for everyone. I know I'm just stating some basics here, but that's Donald Trump. He came in that way in 2016, and he went out with a violent insurrection. Now, in this program, I'll just tell it to you straight. We try not to fall into a trap of mindlessly covering or amplifying every Trump utterance, including the outrageous ones, or the things he posts online, or what he's doing in his new campaign. In a related point, we don't just amplify or cover every instance of hateful rhetoric in public discourse. Indeed, you could do that for an hour every night and you'd have practically no time for any other stories. But as a matter of facts and accountability, we do turn to this story because it is very newsworthy and important and disturbing that Donald Trump, the ex-president running to be your president again, just took action by holding this full meeting and Mar-a-Lago dinner with a white supremacist and Holocaust denier named Nick Fuentes, who's a notorious figure on the far right. Even if you haven't heard a ton about him, it's known what he stands for when they brought him to Mar-a-Lago for this coveted meeting. And along with him, the artist and entrepreneur Ye, formerly known as Kanye West. Now, again, I'm going to say there can be nuance in who people choose to meet with. Sometimes you meet with people that you do oppose. Sometimes the American diplomats meet with people from other countries that they have huge differences with. There's nuance in meetings, and there's nuance in some free speech. But those kind of nuances or caveats do not help this meeting. Well, let me report. Meeting with Ye right now in this political context has an obvious message and endorsement. Ye right now is widely known and politically defined by his unapologetic anti-Semitic rants, as well as his recent round of attacks on the Black Lives Matter movement. He's also used directly violent rhetoric, like his announcement online that he wanted or intended to go, quote, DEFCON 3 on Jewish people. That's who Donald Trump brought to Mar-a-Lago for this special meeting, right now in this context. That's why it reads as an endorsement of that kind of hate, especially without any rebuke to that kind of hate. If you wanted to say, I am going to meet with this person, or I am going to do business with them for some reason, or I have a diplomatic or government reason, but here's what we stand against. None of that's on display here. And let me be clear about free speech, which is something we also take seriously. You have a free speech right to verbally defend Nazis if that's your thing. And then there can be accountability for who wants to stand with you if you continually do that. But when you start using your power and voice and following to organize or encourage people acting like Nazis, going DEFCON 3, well, legally, you're blowing past free speech if people are acting on it. And you're saying, let's go act on it. This is who Donald Trump is meeting with as he launches his campaign. I mean, it's a brand new re-election campaign here, trying to get back into the White House. The meeting comes as Republican leaders eye a midterm electorate that rejected a lot of MAGA extremists. So politics is part of this. It's infused in this. And the politics are odd because Republicans would have an opening here, having seen the electorate go against them. And we showed you some of the Republicans who said, hey, people spoke against them in the midterms. They could go against this meeting to try to make an example out of what Donald Trump's doing. But here's what we're seeing. Trump seemed taken with this Holocaust denier, according to one report. He said after the fact, trying to have it both ways, that he doesn't even know him, but he hasn't announced anything that Fuentes has said in public. Another advisor said the whole thing became an effing nightmare, and Trump is worried that if he did just denounce this, it might antagonize his devoted base. One of the groups that fights against hate, the ADL, denounces Fuentes as a known bigot. Here he is briefly in his own words.
We've got the white Christian men that built this country the first time, and we'll do it again. You think you can replace us? You're wrong. We will replace you.
I want this country to have Catholic media, Catholic Hollywood, Catholic government. I want this to be a Catholic-occupied government, not a Jewish-occupied government.
Once again, just for all of you, January 6th was awesome.
There you have it. An awesome embrace of the violent insurrection, anti-Semitic tropes, the reference to replacement theory, something we've covered here. When he says they will replace the other group, he is taking that conspiracy theory from abroad, from France, by the way, that basically has this far-fetched idea that Jews and minorities are collaborating in an immigration conspiracy that over multiple generations will somehow change the populations of a bunch of countries, but he's flipping it and saying they'll replace others. It's hostile. Now, some Republicans have said that what Trump did was immoral or troubling. Mike Pence, who is lining up a campaign against Trump potentially, says it was wrong to give a white nationalist, anti-Semite, and Holocaust denier a seat at the table, and Trump should apologize for it. Now, I mention the politics because this is very telling. Mr. Pence currently has his own political motivations to separate more from Trump or potentially run against him in the primary. The other Republicans are weighing what we mentioned, the midterm voting, against a lot of Trump candidates with the idea that he could still be the nominee and still be leading the party. But we're talking about hate and Holocaust denial and violent rhetoric. And Mitch McConnell, Kevin McCarthy, and Ron DeSantis, who's also walking this line, have not said anything about this, which raises very real questions about their response to known anti-Semites and hate groups. Meanwhile, there's the part of the Republican Party that is trying to seize on these things to not only hold Trump accountable, but maybe get rid of him politically. The Murdoch Wall Street Journal says Republicans who continue to go for this ride are teeing themselves up for disaster in 24, and this is far from a first for Donald Trump.
Just so you understand, I don't know anything about David Duke, okay? I don't know anything about what you're even talking about with white supremacy or white supremacists. So I don't know. I mean, I don't know, did he endorse me or what's going on? Because, you know, I know nothing about David Duke. I know nothing about white supremacists.
Proud Boys, stand back and stand by. You also had people that were very fine people on both sides.
Everyone remembers Charlottesville, where there was a killing, and where Donald Trump responded to that violence by saying there were very fine people on both sides. Think about where we are as a country. That was 2017. It was a huge scandal, even for the, quote, Trump era. And it was an offhand remark he seemed to make at that press conference, which he wouldn't take back, and it hardened into his stance. But it was words. Here we are, as he runs for president again, and it's not a remark, it's not a reaction to something that happened over there. It's not even a campaign meeting at the RNC where people come up and you say, oh, who should have been let in the room? It's a deliberate and intentional invitation, a place of honor, a seat at the literal table at Mar-a-Lago for this white supremacist artist and this white supremacist Holocaust denier, for two anti-Semites and hate mongers to sit with Donald Trump, and then for him to leave that embrace on the table, and then for Mitch McConnell and others to show just what it takes for them to stand up to him. Apparently, this is not even enough.